The United States invasion of Panama, codenamed Operation Just Cause, was a brief but intense military operation that took place from December 20, 1989 to January 31, 1990. The invasion involved over 27,000 U.S. troops and a formidable display of military might. It was a decisive turning point in U.S.-Panama relations and had far-reaching consequences for both nations. The decision to invade was a controversial one, with a complex web of factors contributing to the Bush administration's decision. The invasion's primary objective was the removal of General Manuel Noriega, Panama's de facto ruler, from power. Noriega, once a close U.S. ally, had become increasingly antagonistic towards the United States. His regime was accused of drug trafficking, corruption, human rights abuses, and electoral fraud. The United States argued that the invasion was necessary to protect American lives and interests in Panama. It cited the Panama Canal's strategic importance and the need to restore democracy in the Central American nation. Manuel Noriega was a complex and controversial figure. A former military intelligence officer, he rose to prominence within Panama's military dictatorship. By the early 1980s, he effectively controlled the country. While initially a U.S. asset during the Cold War, Noriega's relationship with Washington began to sour. His involvement in drug trafficking, money laundering, and human rights abuses drew increasing scrutiny. The United States imposed economic sanctions on Panama in an attempt to pressure Noriega into stepping down. However, these sanctions failed to dislodge him from power and instead exacerbated the economic hardships faced by ordinary Panamanians. Noriega, for his part, skillfully exploited anti-American sentiment to shore up his support. The situation continued to deteriorate, with escalating tensions and sporadic violence. The events leading up to the invasion were marked by a steady increase in tensions. In May 1989, Panamanian presidential elections were widely believed to have been won by the opposition candidate, Guillermo Endara. However, Noriega annulled the election results, further solidifying his grip on power. The United States refused to recognize the legitimacy of Noriega's government. Tensions reached a boiling point in December 1989 when a U.S. Marine officer, Lieutenant Robert Paz, was shot and killed by Panamanian soldiers at a roadblock. This incident, along with reports of increased harassment of U.S. personnel and their families, provided the Bush administration with the pretext it needed to justify military intervention. On December 17, 1989, President George H.W. Bush authorized Operation Just Cause. In the early hours of December 20, 1989, U.S. forces launched a surprise attack on key targets across Panama. Airborne units seized control of strategic installations, including airports and military bases. Ground troops engaged in fierce fighting with Panamanian forces in and around Panama City. The invasion caught Noriega and his supporters off guard, but they put up stiff resistance. The element of surprise was crucial to the operation's success. The U.S. military's superior firepower and advanced technology gave it a decisive advantage. Despite facing fierce resistance in some areas, U.S. forces quickly gained the upper hand. Noriega, now a fugitive in his own country, went into hiding. Section 5. A City Under Fire. Key Events of the Invasion. The invasion was met with mixed reactions from the Panamanian people. While some welcomed the U.S. intervention as a liberation from Noriega's oppressive rule, others viewed it as a violation of their nation's sovereignty. The fighting caused widespread damage in Panama City, particularly in the impoverished neighborhood of El Chorrillo, which was heavily bombarded by U.S. forces. On the first day of the invasion, Guillermo Endara, the winner of the annulled elections, was sworn in as the legitimate president of Panama at a U.S. military base. The U.S. quickly moved to install a new government and restore order. Meanwhile, the hunt for Noriega continued. Section 6. The Price of Freedom. Casualties and International Condemnation. The invasion resulted in casualties on both sides. The Pentagon's official figures state that 23 U.S. service members were killed and 325 wounded during the operation. Panamanian casualties are more difficult to estimate, with figures ranging from several hundred to several thousand. The invasion also displaced thousands of Panamanians, many of whom lost their homes in the fighting. The international community largely condemned the U.S. invasion of Panama. the United Nations General Assembly passed a resolution denouncing the intervention as a violation of international law. The Organization of American States also criticized the invasion. Critics accused the United States of pursuing a policy of interventionism in Latin America. Section 7. The Scales of Justice. Legal challenges and Noriega's fate. The legality of the U.S. invasion of Panama has been the subject of much debate. Critics argue that the invasion violated international law, particularly the UN Charter's prohibition on the use of force against the territorial integrity of another state. They also point to the War Powers Resolution, which requires the U.S. President to seek congressional authorization for the deployment of U.S. forces abroad. Noriega, after eluding U.S. forces for several days, sought refuge in the Vatican Embassy in Panama City. U.S. forces surrounded the embassy using psychological warfare tactics, including blaring loud rock music, to force his surrender. On January 3, 1990, Noriega surrendered to U.S. authorities. He was flown to the United States, where he was tried and convicted on charges of drug trafficking, racketeering, and money laundering. Section 8. Panama. Reborn. The long road to recovery and reconciliation. In the aftermath of the invasion, Panama embarked on a long and challenging process of rebuilding and reconciliation. The country held its first democratic elections in decades in 1994. The Panamanian Defense Forces, which had been Noriega's power base, were abolished and replaced by a smaller civilian-controlled security force. The U.S. provided significant financial assistance to Panama for reconstruction efforts. However, the invasion left a lasting impact on Panamanian society. The scars of the conflict, both physical and psychological, took years to heal. The issue of the invasion remains a sensitive one in Panama to this day. Section 9. Operation Just Cause, a legacy of debate. Operation Just Cause remains a controversial event in U.S. foreign policy history. Its legacy continues to be debated by historians, legal scholars, and policymakers. Supporters of the invasion argue that it was necessary to remove a dictator from power, protect American interests, and restore democracy to Panama. Critics, however, contend that the invasion was an act of aggression that violated international law and caused unnecessary loss of life. They argue that the Bush administration's motives were driven more by political expediency than by genuine concern for the welfare of the Panamanian people. The U.S. invasion of Panama serves as a reminder of the complexities and ethical dilemmas inherent in international relations.